There's an old saying, and I'm sure you've heard it once or twice in your lifetime. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we have started a trend here on the podcast. It seems to be pretty popular, and there's no reason to stop it right now. John Garcia Jr., the director of football recruiting at Sports Illustrated, is back with us today to help us learn all about, or more about, a recent Buckeye commit, Dylan Raiola, and a couple defensive linemen that are extremely talented. You will not want to miss this conversation right here on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes, part of Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Thursday, May 19th in the year 2022, and I want to thank you for making Locked on Buckeyes your first listen or first watch of every single day. I was recently talking to someone maybe a week or so ago, and they were talking about how they listen to Locked on Buckeyes and how they really, really enjoy and love when John Garcia Jr. comes on the podcast to give us our weekly recruiting update. I love it, and it's always enjoyable to hear when a listener of the podcast enjoys it just as much as I do. The three players up today: Dylan Raiola, recent Buckeye commit in the class of 2024, Jason Moore, and then Matayo Uiagalelei. That last name, Uiagalelei, might be familiar to you. His brother is the quarterback at Clemson. Dylan is talented. Jason Moore is talented. Matayo talented as well. And you will love a lot of the things John Garcia Jr. has to say about these three young men. And joining us now here on Locked on Buckeyes, it's John Garcia Jr. back for our weekly check-in and update on the Buckeye recruiting. And John, you and I recently talked about Ohio State quarterbacks, young men that could be potentially Ohio State quarterbacks in the future. You left the kid at the end, and Dylan Raiola said 2024 recruit, he's really talented, could possibly, early rumblings about him reclassifying. I was not expecting him, John, to commit shortly after you and I talked about him here on the show.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State had gotten him on campus a couple of times and really made a strong impression. Look, I mean, easy to sell that quarterback development over the last really 5, 10 plus years, but specifically of late in the style that happens to align with what Raiola does best. He's an incredibly mobile quarterback with a huge arm, and he's got a bit of a gunslinger mentality in his game. So kind of the perfect situation to align with Ohio State. But look, this was no-brainer kind of deal for him. You know, Nebraska has a ton of family history with him. His father was there. I believe his uncle as well, played there and everything. So this was not a, lock for the Buckeyes until recently. Again, back-to-back visits in the spring really sort of wrapped this thing up. And obviously we'll get into it, I'm sure, but Raiola brings about as much talent to that quarterback room as any of these last few quarterback additions, dating back to even Justin Fields. In my mind, he is arguably the top rising junior in the country. And I think if he were to reclassify, he'd be in the mix for one of the best quarterbacks in the 2023 class, much like we saw with Quinn Ewers when he reclassified. So the Buckeyes have had no shortage of bringing in talent, and Raiola fits in right in the thick of it with these prospects, even though he still has maybe up to 2 years of high school football remaining. So he's quite the talent and quite the story.
Let's stick right there with the talent that this young man brings to the table. What talent does he have? What's in his bag, his skill set? What will Buckeye fans love about him once he's in Columbus?
There's just a maturity to his game, both physically in his build. I mean, you're talking 6'2", 6'3", over 200 pounds at this point. And then you watch him play, and his arm is as good as it gets in the country, period, for high school football, in terms of where he can deliver the football and how far down the field he can push the football. And that's obviously something that we associate very closely with what the Ohio State Buckeyes have done on the field and pushing the ball to the third level. Raiola does it from the pocket, outside the pocket, and he's kind of a magician with it as well. I mentioned that he's a bit of a gunslinger. He's got some Patrick Mahomes in him. You know, he throws across his body, and you're like, oh no, what are you doing? And then the ball's right here. I mean, he's got some of the best ball placement I've seen on tape over the last few recruiting classes, and there's just a lot of fun plays to watch when you turn it on. One in particular was gaudy. I mean, I like the no look crossbody Mahomes stuff. That's fun. I mean, we all recognize that. And look, it's high school, so you don't know how much he's going to do that in college, and that's fun. But there was one in particular where the receiver, they were about at the 40-yard line going in. The wide receiver's behind the defensive back at the very last inch of the back pylon. And the DB turns like, oh, this is an easy interception. I got this. And the ball just ropes right over him into the receiver's arms with literally no room to spare. And that wasn't from the pocket. He wasn't stationary on that play. And that was kind of the one that I was like, okay, this is a different kid. And he was playing in Texas last year. So great competition as well. Another Buckeye from the Lone Star State, although now he's transferred over to the state of Arizona, where Devin Brown played his junior year of high school football as well. So a little bit of a weird, ironic connection there. But Raiola's got the goods in just about every way. He's a capable runner, not one you're going to design plays for, but he's plenty athletic and mobile. And again, he's just got this maturity. He's moved all over the country already, growing up in Hawaii, going to Texas, now Arizona. So that brings a little bit more maturity than your typical, sophomore in high school. So obviously there's a ton to like about this kid's game.
Ryan Day had shifted the play of the quarterback at Ohio State. Didn't take very long. Even before he was head coach with Dwayne Haskins there in 2018, he kind of realized, like, my style is going to be different than what Urban Meyer wants his quarterback to do. He also knows that there has to be a level of maturity with the quarterback, and he has to have his head on straight and right so that when he's on the field, we're not worried about him making some boneheaded or nonsense plays. You mentioned maturity a few times, but as Ryan Day has kind of shifted the quarterback position, everything you've said, from the maturity this young man has to his skill set on the field to him being mobile, he can run, but he's not really that kind of guy. It sounds like he fits the mold of what Ryan Day wants in a quarterback, but then him being so talented, it's kind of like Ryan Day went after him, Corey Dennis went after him. They're like, we're not going to stop until he says yes to being an Ohio State Buckeye.
Yeah, the fit here, Jay, is about as good as it gets. You talk about just the classic, constructed, player created mold for certain schools in certain positions, and Raiola at quarterback for OSU is as good as it gets. I think that's such an undervalued aspect of quarterback recruiting, right? Everybody wants Arch Manning, but does he fit every single scheme? Not necessarily. But I do think in this situation, Raiola's a great fit on and off the field for the Buckeyes. It's another, plant the flag moment in terms of the national reach Ohio State has at every position. And when you do it at quarterback, obviously it sets the bar a whole lot higher. So there's really no downside to this verbal commitment. Maybe you can construct one like, hey, if they are going to take a quarterback in 23 and Raiola doesn't reclassify, then maybe it's a little bit harder to pick up that quarterback in 2023 because they know, hey, Raiola's coming in the following, January. So maybe that's a bit of a detractor, but even if that's the case, I think you're set up really nice at Ohio State. And they do seem to be going after a couple more quarterbacks in 23. So it's not all said and done at that class. So that's really the only constructed downside I can see in taking Dylan Raiola. But it's a talent acquisition business, and Ohio State at that position has done it as well or better than anybody in the country. And this is just another feather in the cap toward that statement.
Last thing about Dylan Raiola, what is the competition like that he'll be facing in Arizona during his junior year?
It'll be better. He's moving to Chandler.
Okay.
That's becoming kind of the next great metro area in the Phoenix area of Arizona. I think the combination of the affordability of playing in the desert, or moving to the desert, I should say, the pandemic, and the increased football profile has accumulated a lot of talent in that area. A Chandler, Saguaro High School. There's a lot of schools in that area that churn out Division I prospects, and that number is growing because of the country's situations over the last couple of years. So I do think that he's going to play better competition as a junior, but I'd be lying to you, Jay, if I didn't say that, hey, he's going to tear it up almost wherever he goes in the country. He can go to IMG or Mater Dei to
Whew.
me and still light it up, similar to how he did as a sophomore in Texas. He's that talented.
Man. I wish he lived closer to where I live so I could watch him play a couple games in high school because it sounds like he's that kind of talent. Moving on from a kid that committed to Ohio State recently to someone that just recently dropped his top 5, and Ohio State is in that group. It's James Moore, a defensive lineman, 6'6", 265-pound, from DeMatha Catholic High School in Hyattsville, Maryland. This young man in his top 5, it's Maryland, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. You got to get those pesky Wolverines in there as well. What can you tell us about this young man on the football field?
Oh, this is a beast. Like you mentioned, 6'6", 265, also a basketball player. And he's played both sports on varsity since he was a freshman. And anybody who knows about football in that Catholic league in D.C., it's legit. You've got, Gonzaga College High School, DeMatha, a bunch of great schools, Good Counsel, one of them as well. Great competition every single Friday night. And Jason dominates it. He's a big interior projection, but he's got enough length and footwork and quickness to maybe play on the outside. I think that's where the basketball really factors in to his development. But with that 6'6", 260-pound frame, you just kind of envision him moving inside down the line because he's just got so much more room to fill out. But I do think he's got a little bit of positional versatility to where early in his college career, he can line up outside if you need him to. But when you watch the tape, easy to see why. He's got a lot of schools that are kind of known for defense high on his list. And I think it's going to be an interesting recruitment going forward. He can win with speed, but he especially likes to win with power. He can kind of overwhelm an offensive tackle. And he's one of these guys that when he does rush from the outside, he's bigger than just about every blocker that he goes up against. And that's just not something that we're used to seeing in high school football. Usually your offensive tackles are in the 260, 270 plus range, and the DNs are a little bit smaller, right? 220, 230 in the high school range. But when you're coming out 265 at 6'6", you can overwhelm a tackle who's used to being the biggest guy on the block. So that's something that's become very favorable in his game. But he's got enough quickness to work underneath and work some counter moves other than just, bull rushing against that offensive tackle. So as he continues to develop and gain weight and add mass, I could see him working all up and down a given defensive line. And again, it's no surprise to see the type of schools that are high on his list. They're all sort of known for front seven or defensive line play in particular.
Jason, not James. I don't know where I got James from. It is Jason Moore. But thinking about this young man, and I like guys that play dual sports in high school. I know there's a push for 7-on-7 or spring football in certain states, and I know that that's going to be a bigger push now. I'm a pusher that play multiple sports, play 2, play 3, doesn't really matter. I think that team aspect, and it really helps you be a better, well-rounded athlete by playing a football, a basketball, maybe doing track or baseball, things like that. But with him playing 2 sports, how do you think that's impacted his play on the football field?
I think it's enhanced it, Jay. We talk the joke about football and where it's gone with all these spread offenses is basketball on grass, right? Well, he plays basketball, so I think some of the ability to extend, to position himself with leverage, and to play laterally, which are essential in basketball, translates so well to the defensive line in particular. How many times are you fighting against a reach block and you have to move laterally and extend on the same play? If you're setting the edge, that extension, that base that you need for rebounding translates over to football as well. And obviously general overall quickness also, and conditioning, my goodness, the ability to run up and down a court, that certainly helps you on the football field. So I do think it enhances his game. I do think that, multi-sport athletes have a much higher ceiling because they've never been able to really focus on the one sport. But early in the development, before you get to college, I think it's plenty good to play as many sports as you can to get those muscles used to doing different things. A lot of defensive linemen who maybe don't play another sport are probably a little bit more stiff, a little bit more on a narrow path where they're only gonna beat you with technique more so than raw athleticism. But when you get a kid like this who's done a little bit of both, he can beat you with technique, but he could also beat you with his God-given gifts as well. And that's something that wherever he goes at the next level, they'll be able to to push forward in the technical department, and of course he'll add some weight as well, and he'll become that well-rounded defensive lineman. He's a guy that it's really easy to like early into the investigation and deep dive into his tape, because he's got a lot of traits that just scream big-time college football.
So, John, like a lot of high school recruits nowadays, they're going to be doing a lot of visits, making their official visits coming up in June. I saw that this young man, Jason Moore, has one set up with Michigan on June 17th, but also he has one with Ohio State on June 24th. Do you think that's the only time he'll be in Columbus, or would you kind of suggest that he might be there for a game or two in the fall?
It really depends on the timeline, Jay, and I think he's trying to take all of his visits in June, if possible. I think all of them are set except for Maryland, which is, of course, the in-state school, the school he's most familiar with and easiest to get to. So that's going to be interesting. I do think he'll obviously get to Ohio State for that official visit in June. As it currently is constructed, that is the last official visit on the schedule, which could be great news for the Buckeyes. You usually want to be first or last in that official visit scheduling. So typically kids who take all their visits in June or around the month of June, they want to make a decision before the season begins. And if that's the case, I think getting the last official visit is near ideal for Ohio State. Obviously, more time with Ryan Day, with Larry Johnson, who's done as well as any coach when it comes to developing defensive linemen. I know that's a big appeal for Jason, but it's also a strong group of contenders. You know, Notre Dame is selling the whole academic versus athletic standpoint, Michigan as well. And then, you know, Maryland's the local school. You know, he certainly believes that program is trending up the right way. And Penn State is similar in terms of what they've been able to produce in the front seven when it comes to, you know, all conference or even NFL type of players. So you can understand the appeal of all of these programs for Jason. But if the Buckeyes, especially with Larry Johnson, get the last visit, you got to feel decent about OSU's chances. It does seem like Notre Dame might be the primary competition here. So, you know, another battle with old friend Marcus Freeman for OSU fans. So that'll be interesting. I do think that regionally, that's going to be the trend we see going forward. I think Ohio State and Notre Dame are going to be the battling programs for the top kids in Big Ten's, you know, footprint, you know, and that does extend now to Maryland, of course. So in that Big Ten footprint, I do think that there's going to be a lot of Ohio State and Notre Dame battles, and this looks like it could be the next one.
This is the time that I know a lot of people love. John, scale of 1 to 10, 1, it won't happen, or least likely, 10, the most likely. Do you think it's likely or not likely, or somewhere in between, where that Jason Moore commits to Ohio State?
I think you're in the 6 to 7 range here. This is a strong possibility here for OSU. Like I said, I do believe Notre Dame is the chief competition. He'll see the Irish before he gets to Ohio State for the official visit. So I do think that benefits Ohio State in the long run, especially if he wants to make that late summer verbal commitment. If it extends into the season, maybe he takes more visits. Like you said, maybe he gets to some games, and that could shuffle things up just a little bit. But the positioning of the official visit, the track record of what Larry Johnson has done, I do think those benefit Ohio State in a pretty big way against Notre Dame and some of the others on the list.
Last but not least, from a kid in Dylan Raiola, who's 2024 kid who ended up committing sooner than I expected. I don't know about you, and it was sooner than what I expected, to Jason Moore, a very talented two-sport athlete, to someone that played both ways at one point in high school, to Matayo Uiagalelei. I don't know how I got that correctly because I've been working with that one for quite a long time. 6'4", 255-pound, really talented defensive end. The last name might sound familiar. His brother is the quarterback at Clemson. But this young man at St. John Bosco, I'm hearing nothing but praise, nothing but amazing things about him when he's on the football field.
Yeah, 6'5", 6'6", 260 pounds, similar size to Jason Moore, but just as athletic. My goodness, he was a great tight end earlier in his high school career. He does play a little bit of basketball as well, but he's really starting to focus on playing defensive line. You know, when you can do so many things and you get to pick one, it's certainly a relief to a degree. So Matayo's going to push towards that direction here as a senior in 2022. And this is a kid that, not only because of his brother and the notoriety, but this kid's at St. John Bosco. I mean, this is one of the top programs in the country and maybe the best, you know, league in high school football, the Trinity League out in Los Angeles, there's elite competition week in, week out, and he's dominated it from a pass rushing standpoint, from a receiving standpoint. He's got a lot of twitch to his game. He's quick as well. I do think he's developing in terms of his technical pass rushing ability, in terms of building moves and then building counter moves off of a primary move. I do think he's a little bit more raw and reliant on that pure athleticism at this standpoint, but that's okay. You know, we've seen D linemen turn the corner in 1 year from raw to, oh my goodness, what happened to this kid? And I think Matayo, once he focuses on one side of the ball in college, I think he'll be able to push closer to that side of the coin. And that's why he's had every school in the country after him for what feels like, Jay, like 3 or 4 years at this point. He's been big like this since he was an 8th grader when he began to pick up scholarship offers. So this is a long-standing recruitment that has had some twists and turns, especially with the coaching carousel that we saw last fall, all the changes with some of the schools, particularly in the Pac-12, where obviously he's from that footprint. So I do think that's going to factor in before all is said and done. But this is a national recruitment, you know, USC, Oregon, Alabama, obviously Ohio State, and Clemson, where he's got plenty of familiarity as well. So this one is going to be hard to gauge, I think, at this point, Jay, because there's probably a long way to go before it's all said and done. No official visits, no official top group, anything like that. So this is going to be one of the most tracked recruitments of any kid nationally all the way through in this class of 23.
As you're saying, it's going to be kind of slow, kind of drawn out. It reminds me of JT Tuimoloau, where he ended up committing, I think it was July 4th of 2020. Now, it was completely different circumstances due to the pandemic and not being able to make official visits, things like that. You can play games, but the visits and things like that were not really supposed to be happening at that time. So it's a completely different situation. But I remember that little recruitment, really wasn't little, was big. It was a slow process. His family ties, they were not trying to rush into anything. And that's what pops into my mind, because Matayo has a brother at Clemson. He can go out there in Clemson and play phenomenal football. But as I've seen and as I've read, there's a silent top 5, not really a bold proclaimed top 5, but more so a silent top 5 of Ohio State, Alabama, USC, Oregon, and Clemson. And if it's going to be slow and drawn out, I think that those places that are in his top group, those coaches will understand and be like, look, we'll wait. We won't push you. We'll let you do things how you want to, because I think part of it is it's his culture. Their culture does things a little bit different than maybe how some of these coaches might want him to, but I think they'll be patient. I think Ryan Day has maybe the upper hand because he saw JT Tuimoloau. We have to be patient. Just let him do his thing. His family, they'll announce it when they're ready. That's the similar connection to me in my head briefly right now with Matayo and how his recruitment might go over the next few months and maybe even into next year.
Yeah, there's no endpoint in sight here. I do think this is a kid who takes it into the fall at a minimum, probably closer to December, and maybe even to the following year. As you said, I think there's a long way to go in this recruitment. But what's interesting about it, Jay, is that he's been to every school that we've talked about, like 2, 3, 4 times each at least, including Oregon and USC with the new coaching staffs in place at those programs. So I think it's one of those, like we talked about with Jason earlier, you could sort of construct a little bit of a sales pitch from all 5 of these programs. And a lot of the things we said about Jason in terms of Larry Johnson, in terms of what Ohio State's been able to do from a recruiting and developmental standpoint, all of those still line up with Matayo, especially now that he's really focusing over the next year on defensive line play, as opposed to being maybe a hybrid tight end who could shake things up on offense. I think that defensive focus certainly helps Ohio State more than it hurts it relative to some of these other programs. And I also think the stability of Ohio State helps in this recruitment. We mentioned it. The schools that he's closest to, USC and Oregon, are under year 1 coaching staffs. So if it does go into the fall like we think it might, and maybe one of those programs stumbles out of the gates, you wonder just perceptionally how that could affect top recruits in general, especially uncommitted top recruits like we believe Uiagalelei is going to be at that time once the games start in September. So I do think that's going to factor into this recruitment. It could shuffle the official visits when he does start to take them, either later this summer or during the season. But I say all that to say that Ohio State's going to stay in it all the way into the end. And I believe Clemson will stay in it all the way into the end as well. Alabama also, of course, incredibly stable. So those three feel so different from the other two, not just geographically, but also in terms of what the program has going for itself right now. So it'll be really interesting to see how that one plays out. But like we said, Jay, don't expect a lot of tangible moves made in the near future with Uiagalelei, but it doesn't lessen how important of a recruit he is for a lot of programs.
John, really quickly, got maybe 20 seconds on this one. Does Ohio State have the upper hand over Clemson right now?
I don't think so. I don't think I could call it for any one school at this point. He grew up loving USC. They changed coaching staffs. Oregon's assistants have strong connections to California and the Polynesian culture. I could see that. He's very familiar with Clemson, obviously, with what his brother does. And maybe his brother's season could begin to impact that perception a little bit as well. We talked about Ohio State and Larry Johnson, easy to sell that one. Same thing for Alabama. So I don't think it's easy to plug any one leader at this point for Matayo. I think it's that early, and I think it's going to change. Even if I did say, yeah, Ohio State's the favorite, I do think all of that's going to change in the coming months. But again, he's certainly one to keep an eye on either way.
A weekly update with John Garcia Jr. It's here. It's over. It's so much fun every time John gets to come on. You can follow John on Twitter at John Garcia_Jr. You can follow me on Twitter at JSteven07. We'll try to get John back on next week. Not sure what we'll talk about with top fives coming out, with players saying, oh, these are my groups, and then with get players committing like Dylan Raiola when we don't expect it. You never know what to expect. So, John, I'm glad you're back again this week. Hope to see you again next week. And you drop so much knowledge, man. I'm sure Buckeye fans will love it. Thanks for coming back on. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Jay. Thanks for having me.